Like global warming and the release of a new Ed Sheeran album, meetings are constantly happening and will one day kill us all.
Have you ever thought that the way we view meetings as a curse could be a direct result of the toxic productivity culture? Because to me, it's very obvious. I'll take some time of this episode to unpack this thought. I'll take it as a win if you leave with this new, refreshing worldview by the end of this episode. I'll also walk you through the steps of understanding the root cause of the meeting madness at your workplace. So let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the world of less shitty meetings. I'm your host, Sana, and I'm here to help you get rid of shitty meetings so you can find time for things that matter. How do you think of meetings right now? Most people see them as a distraction from real work. But what if I told you that meetings are important work? The dismissal of meetings as non work implies that the thinkers are separate from the doers. It reinforces that toxic productivity culture that focuses on output. If we're operating in the knowledge economy, and if we consider ourselves knowledge workers, aren't we supposed to be different from manual laborers who are paid just for performing physical tasks? I mean, isn't it bizarre then to think that meetings that are an amazing opportunity for collective thinking and knowledge sharing are actually considered unproductive? I'm going to give you a second to let that sink in. Collaboration is a key part of the definition of a knowledge worker. But unfortunately, our team's productivity is locked up in non knowledge work tasks. We overschedule our calendars, we are impatient with the slower pace of discussions, and the stress of a productivity driven environment. They're all contributing to this view of meetings as unproductive and a waste of time. Sure, the number and quality of meetings today give us plenty of reasons to dislike them, but so does how we measure productivity and our obsession with it. In a very simple, idealistic world where every job was about repeatedly doing the same thing over and over and over again, without any collective vision or thought, meetings would be pretty useless. But in the real world, the one we live in today, things are complex. We are driven by shared perspective and collective goals. We need to consistently do new things to keep up with the world. This kind of knowledge creation is messy. It requires collaboration, conversation, reflection, and meetings were supposed to be a great place for that. They're one of the many ways in which information and knowledge flows within your organization. They're not isolated events that interrupt our days. Thinking of them as just that offers a very narrow and zoomed in view of the world with limited solutions to fix the problem, right? Cut the meetings short, invite fewer people, have fewer meetings. But think for a minute. Your organization is basically a group of people with a shared perspective working to achieve shared goals. If you want people to work together to have that sense of shared perspective and clarity of goals, to be able to innovate and solve problems, these people need to talk, communicate, exchange information. How this information flows in your organization between individuals, teams, horizontally or vertically, is your communication architecture. Just like emails and phone calls, Slack messages, and even your Google and Notion docs, meetings are a way for people to exchange knowledge and information. Of course, there's still that question of when meetings are the right tool to leverage. But the first thing to do if we truly want to leverage meetings towards achieving our big, audacious goals is to stop thinking of them as non work and start thinking of them as critical to our work as knowledge workers and problem solvers. And there are extensive studies to support this view. Some suggest meetings can even become a team's competitive advantage. In fact, if you do a quick search on Google and look for Pixar and the Brain Trust, you'll see that Pixar credits the success of their movies to this meeting that they have, which they call the brain trust, and that they've perfected over time.
Every once in a while, magic happens. And by magic, what I mean is there's the loss of the ego in the room. And what you see are ideas going out. It doesn't matter whether they're bad or good. Nobody's clinging to them. They're just focused on the problem. And almost every film has one of those times, usually 2-day offsite, when the magic takes place.
Now, if you're in your early career and new to the world of work, I'm afraid you have no clue how a meeting like the kind I'm trying to describe is even possible. You may never have seen a meeting where we could let our minds wander and come up with ideas without having to rush into the next meeting or be freaking out about an urgent deliverable all the time. Because I think toxic productivity just killed those kind of meetings. But those who've been around for a while probably know what I'm talking about. If you've listened to me this far, and if you're at least ready to give meetings another chance, you must be thinking, fine, let's say meetings are important and they can be critical to success, and they're these amazing places for knowledge sharing and creation. Where do I go with this new perspective? I'd say the next step is to get rid of all the garbage advice you've been seeing on the internet. The generic advice that says have an agenda, reduce meeting times to God knows 7 minutes or whatever. That is bad advice not because it's entirely wrong, but because it's keeping you from seeing the actual problem. So how do you find the real problem? And what is stopping you from leveraging meetings as a powerful tool? Let's rewind a little. A year ago, or a little over a year ago, my team and I were so occupied with meetings, we were struggling to find time for even important conversations. Work was seeping into our evenings because meetings took up the rest of the day. I could see that the excitement around even the most exciting projects was dying, and it was very obvious that people weren't happy. So my immediate reaction, cut down the meetings, make them shorter. And we did that, but it was only a couple of days before our calendar started to fill up again, and of course we were doing something wrong. But here's what we ended up doing that truly helped. The first thing I did was I conducted a meeting audit. I listed down all the meetings that happened in the last quarter. You can decide to do it for a longer period too if you want. You can take a year. But before I did this audit, I did one more thing. I made a list of meetings that I thought could not be replaced with emails or Slack messages or Notion docs, but were actually critical to helping us moving forward in terms of our goals, whether they were financial goals or strategic goals. And I did that before doing this meeting audit because I didn't want it to cloud my view of what meetings were critical or needed to be had. Once I had these two lists, the second thing I did was from the list of meetings that we were actually having, I started to categorize them into buckets. And I figured that there were 3 broad categories that I could do this with. One was the regular recurring meetings, right? Your cadence meetings. For you, this could include your daily or weekly huddles, your board meetings, your one-on-ones, project status meetings, etc. Right? These are predictable meetings that don't change too often, and the idea most of the times is to get a pulse on things. The second is the kind of meetings where we were trying to create some sort of change. We were either trying something new or fixing something old. So let's say you have a new project and there's a project kickoff call, or we want to start a new marketing campaign and you are doing a brainstorming meeting, or there's a problem that needs quick resolution or a decision need to be made, and so there's a meeting for that, or you have a new hire or a new brand identity and you need to make a decision on that. The third category was technically all other meetings where we were either just networking, exploring, interacting. So this could be a sales call or an investor pitch or even hiring interviews. So I made these 2 lists. One my ideal list of meetings, which I thought were critical and could not be replaced by simply Slack messages, etc. One was the actual list of meetings that we were having, and I categorized those actual list of meetings into 3 buckets. And then I started to look for patterns in the meetings that we were having and tried to see what that told me about the flow of information in our organization. Now, you might have your own observations when you do this exercise. You might see that some meetings had started with the right intention and there was a need, but that need no longer existed. Of course, these are redundant meetings now. They're just on the calendar, so they continue to happen. Then there are meetings that make sense, but they're not really fulfilling the purpose that they were intended to. I also noticed when I was doing this exercise for us that there were a lot of meetings in that second bucket, which is meetings where we were trying to change or start something. And most of these seem to be reactive or firefighting meetings. And then lastly, I also noticed a lot of status update meetings. But from my experience, I knew that many of those had turned into Q&A sessions on why things weren't moving forward and how to solve for that. Once you've identified what those patterns are, which meetings can you see a lot of, which meetings seem redundant, you might start to understand a little bit about where there are breakages in flow of information or knowledge in your organization. So I'll give you an example. Too many firefighting meetings at our organization were really indicative of other problems in the organization. The flow of knowledge was broken somewhere, which led to misalignment in the team or a lack of understanding of the goals. And that led us to a meeting because something broke and needed fixing. So in reality, those meetings were not the actual problem. They were actually a solution to another problem. In some cases, I felt like multiple firefighting meetings were compensating for one good planning or problem-solving meeting. Similarly, the status update meetings that were turning into Q&A meetings seemed to be indicative of a lack of a knowledge management system. So people were really scrambling for information and couldn't move forward with the tasks that they had been given. Once I had figured these things out, the next step for me was to also identify missing meetings. So I compared this list of actual meetings with my ideal list of meetings to see were there any meetings that I thought were important, but either they weren't happening or if they were, they weren't achieving their goal. And I realized that there were 2 important meetings missing. Again, when you do this for yourself, this might look different for you. For me, there were 2 meetings missing. One-on-ones between department heads and their teams. And I felt like those are extremely important for offering feedback, building a relationship, creating that safe space for both to talk to each other, clear out the air sometimes, solve problems together, and so on. And the second kind of meeting that was missing were brainstorming meetings. There were hardly any brainstorming meetings, which was odd for a team like ours that was focused on finding better ways of doing work. This entire exercise of identifying patterns, figuring out redundancies, understanding the flow of information to some extent within our organization, and also identifying missing meetings was a great starting point for me. By the way, I also looked for patterns in terms of attendance and duration, right? So, for example, if there are 3 people and they're in every meeting, that was also indicative that I was relying heavily on just a few people doing everything. And this truly helped me zoom into the actual problem that needs solving. And so I want you to try this out. If you really want to have less shitty meetings, stop thinking about what is the best format or the number of people or time or agenda. Are your meetings effective, etc., etc. That's not the right starting point. Find out the real problem. Make a list of the meetings you're having. What are they telling you about the flow of information in your organization? Which meetings, if done well, could be critical to your organization's success? List them down, categorize them, look for patterns and gaps. And when we meet over the next few weeks, we'll dive into questions around meeting structures and schedules and ROIs. Till then, this meeting is adjourned. If you found this helpful or interesting, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your colleagues who could use a meeting makeover. All episodes are now available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Until next time, remember, life's too short for shitty meetings. Let's make them better.